Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. So glad you're here with us again this week. Will is in Austin, Texas at the Armadillo Holiday Bazaar. And so I invited somebody who I wanted to know more about. I consider Cali Hobgood a good friend, somebody I know on the road really well, and I always enjoy seeing her. But the thing that I enjoy about this podcast and why I actually wanted to be involved in starting it was that we got to have the conversations about getting inside the mind of our friends and other creatives to find out what motivates them, what inspires them. And this conversation with Cali today, I really had a good time. I feel like I learned a lot about her, but I also resonated with a lot of her concepts and the things that kind of keep her going. Her positive attitude, her wanting to share her voice. We've had a number of photographers on the podcast over the last number of years, and I believe that Cali works quite differently than any of the other photographers we've spoken with, in the sense that she uses traditional film and she develops her images. She shoots in black and white, and then she hand paints each of her images. One thing I'll say before we jump into this conversation is that the thing I really admire about her and how she works is she gets a visual image that comes to her at random periods of time. And then she chases that image. She finds the item that she's seeing, and she plays with light. She plays with developing an exposure to get it to look exactly as she wants. And it isn't just about the image. The image represents something deeper, a memory, a person, a conversation, something that is meaningful to her, something that can be celebrated on one hand for its mundane quality, but then also might have a deeper meaning. So enough about that. Let's just jump right into this conversation that I had with Cali Hobgood.
You know, one of the reasons I have hesitated to do this is, I mean, obviously, I have opinions and I'm not afraid to say them. But once I say them, you can't unsay things. I have a kind of a primitive communication style. I spend a lot of time in the darkroom. I was in the darkroom today.
Yeah.
And it's dark.
And you don't have to communicate with anybody but your medium.
Right, exactly. And hope to not run into things, you know? Yeah. So anyway, my hesitancy was, rooted in me, not in you guys at all. Yeah. So I'm glad we're doing it now.
You know, you're saying that about being self-conscious about that. I'm going to jump right to one of my questions I had for further on in the conversation, which was with your work, you don't seem to shy away from controversy in some of the uses of symbolism and imagery that the public might have an opinion upon. You've had to have a couple of uncomfortable situations with the public. Let's just jump right in there, shall we, with that whole interaction.
Well, it's true that I can't seem to stop myself when an image becomes a part of my visual language and I have to make it. Obviously, there are some images that I've made that are challenging for some people. Mm-hmm. Most often, it's a case of being able to say, well, fortunately, this is none of your business. But
this wasn't for you or about you kind of thing.
You don't like this? Well, I do. I can make it bigger.
Yeah.
There are always going to be people that want to, slow your roll. Mm-hmm. But most people do not. I think about all of the 30 plus years that I've been doing this, and those images resonate with people for the same reason the initial idea resonated with me to the point that I made something.
Well, can we talk about the coat hanger and how that resonated with you?
Sure. It came to me in my mind the same way all of my images do.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if I have a slide projection screen in the back of my brain. It's literally a physical feeling that
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing an image in my mind, and it's usually some sort of trigger that makes me see it.
Mm-hmm.
I can be listening to music or at the theater or reading a book
Mm-hmm.
or overhearing conversation between other people, and I'll just have a visual appear in the back of my mind. And if it stays with me and grows
Okay.
in its significance, then I have to make it. And with the hanger,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just the message of women's reproductive health rights,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just the history of what my mother and my grandmother and my great grandmother lived in their lives and what they believed.
Mm-hmm.
It was that function is beauty. You know, the hanger is not separate from the blue dress or from the shirts or from any of the things that you might find in my closet or your closet. It
Right.
just happens to have this other visual association. It's not a metaphor by any means,
Okay.
but now it's achieved the point of kind of being a visual metaphor for providing women's reproductive health.
Right. Kind of taking
Options.
power into your own hands. You know, when abortion was illegal back in the early days, that was a method used to try and set yourself free from what you felt trapped under. And we haven't had to think in those kinds of barbaric terms in so long until it was overturned. Did that image come to you before, or was it after reproductive rights were overturned in the Supreme Court?
Before.
Mm.
I also have an image of a pack of birth control pills.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with lots of different things like knitting needles,
Mm-hmm.
sanitary napkins,
Mm-hmm.
condoms. Some things are harder than others. To make serious work, you have to be lighthearted, allow your mind to roll with whatever you're visualizing.
Mm-hmm.
And to make lighthearted work, you have to be able to be pretty serious. And the hanger thing, I saw it, I worked on it. There was never a question, the sound of those hangers in the closet when they bump into each other, the history of the dry cleaning world where, my dad's shirts would come back from the dry cleaners,
Mm-hmm.
the way our lives centered around those domestic things like
Mm-hmm.
getting dressed every day or getting pregnant and not wanting to be.
Right.
It gets amazing with that image, how some people just want a really big coat hanger image for their walk-in closet.
So it could be like the mundane versus the deeper, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sparks so many different kinds of reactions from an image. I didn't realize that piece had been created before Roe v. Wade was overturned. Renee and I were with you at the Des Moines Arts Festival, and we were passing you saying, "Hey, good night. How was your night?" And you were clearly shaken because somebody got confrontational with you in your booth about that image. And it happened to be the anniversary of the overturning of that decision in the Supreme Court. Wasn't it a year later, or was it the actual day?
It was the actual day.
That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's right. You were really some of the first people I had talked to after, I'd taken my work face off for the day.
Mm-hmm.
We were leaving the show. And I was so startled that happened. I knew that the decision was likely to be released that day. And that was a pretty pivotal day. That's a strangely pivotal day over the course of many years. You know how sometimes when the moon is full, weird things happen.
It's a big Supreme Court day because the years earlier, that was when marriage equality had passed.
Yes.
And I remember having that moment of just like exuberance of what we were able to do. And then to feel like years later, I remember that thinking on that moment, thinking, oh my God, literally steps forward and steps back here. What's going on, with what's going on in life right now? I don't get it.
It's so true. And, as I said, usually nothing bad happens. Only great things happen.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes really, really crazy things can happen in the middle of a great city like Des Moines. And that day was one of those days. And it's weird, Douglas. I remember exactly where I was when the gay marriage decision was released.
Mm-hmm.
It was in that little coffee shop around the corner from the library and on the edge of that show. And I was with 4 people that decision impacted.
Wow.
Significantly. But the other strange things about that particular time of the year. Do you know that is the same day or the day before or after that Michael Jackson died? Do you remember? Were you at Des Moines?
Mm-hmm.
Farrah Fawcett.
Mm.
I know that seems like an innocuous way to mark time by the things that happen on the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of Des Moines Art Festival. and when I think about all the great things that have happened to me. But the thing that happened then, there was a permitted protest that had been planned about 8 blocks away from the show site because other people were anticipating the decision to be released. And it was protesting that it had been overturned.
Okay.
Well, there was a counter protest as well. And at that point in the day, it was 7:00 at night. It wasn't dark, but getting dark.
Mm-hmm.
Big Friday night, crowds of people. The main stage was lighting up and the show was hustling. Beautiful evening, families. The people that left the protest and the counter protesters all were heading.
They came to Sunday the show?
Yes, yes.
Gosh.
And so all of a sudden, the foot traffic really picked up and bam, there were a lot of people there and some of them weren't that happy. And I had that piece right
front and center.
Yeah.
Proud.
And I noticed that this man was about to get confrontational, and I noticed that I didn't have anyone that I could ask to stay when I went to get help or ask anyone to go get help.
So did he have words with you or some issues that he took up with you? Wow.
Yes. And I stepped forward and then I stepped back and I left the back of my booth and I went to find an officer. I gave them the description. I went back to my booth and they were looking. Then the guy came back when the police weren't with me. Mm. And I could tell that it was the thing that I didn't want to be involved in. And he was threatening physical violence. I was not worried just for me, but like the 10,000 people at the show.
Wow.
My friends to the left of me and to the right, and an artist and her husband across from me. Mm-hmm. Of course, when someone is intimidating you and you're a woman and you're alone, sometimes your first instinct is to get a guy to, help you.
Get some muscle. Yeah.
I thought about my neighbor's husband, thought about yelling for help, like a nanosecond decision. It wasn't like I was thinking at length.
Yeah.
I was
it's
acting.
Instinctual.
Yeah. And I didn't want to draw anyone else into it because, it was my image. And I knew that I was right. Mm-hmm. This was a significant thing to me.
An art show. I mean, you have a right to express your artwork, your opinions, your vision, to connect. And if somebody else can't deal with it, that's not any reason for you to shrink.
Right. I'm really gratified by the number of people that have collected that. And it's still in its edition. The guy came back again.
So he was looking for a fight, it sounds like.
Yeah. And he was making a live video.
That's scary.
It scared me because he was saying bad things to other people and said where we were and to come and join him, to run me off the streets of Des Moines, or, and that wasn't all he said, but there's no reason to,
Right. But, The bad words are terrible, but the idea that this is going to turn into like even scarier event, like you don't know what unpredictable stuff's going to happen here. I mean,
Right.
wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I was scared, but I was angry. I had already had plenty of times on the street where people, men, have gotten,
Yeah, let's be real here. Who are
Yeah.
these people?
Right,
They
right.
pretty much are the same type.
Yeah. Belligerent. I mean, I've had a lot of hilarious things happen too, more hilarious than belligerent and scary. But anyway, suffice it to say, the show was there for me right away. The police were there for me right away. And they found the guy.
Mm.
And somebody did kind of a deep dive to see if there was actually something floating around on social media site,
Okay.
including my name and where all of us were that weekend.
Yeah.
And he was just a kook. He was one in, I don't know, there's 6 billion people on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Was that probably the worst interaction you've had out on the road?
I've been more scared before.
Really?
Yeah, but I do always have an air horn. I know it's funny, but because I
you
do
have a
so much
plan.
paddling.
Right.
Yeah, I do so much paddling. An air horn is the thing that you have in case you're at the beach and there's a problem with you
right.
or someone else.
Yeah.
And making big noise gets people's attention.
But have experiences like that affected what you're going to make or what you're going to say, or have you stayed true to your voice?
Oh, absolutely. Truer than ever.
Mm.
Although I'll tell you, there was a time 4 years ago
Mm-hmm.
during COVID
Mm-hmm.
when we were all hanging out in our own homes
Mm-hmm.
and doing our best to do the best that we could.
Right. Get through it.
Yeah.
Have faith.
Yeah. And I did make a lot of pretty brutally honest imagery about things that were going on that I didn't like.
Okay.
And what I found was that that's not who I am. I'm a happy person.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty happy, satisfied, very lucky, privileged person.
Mm-hmm.
And so making work from a point of view of the Lessing table. There's a poem called The Lessing Table, and
Tell us about it.
it's kind of bleak. It's a contemporary poem, and I'm blanking on the name of the poet, but it describes how over the course of this woman's marriage, the table at which she and her spouse share their lives gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's called the Lessing table. And I want my table to get bigger. I want to have a bigger table all the time. And so the work that gratifies me and satisfies me the most, like The Hanger, recognizes and acknowledges all the work that my mother and my grandmother did to ensure my right to have control over my own body. It honors rather than cries foul at the state of the world.
I get you. It's not from a place of woe is me.
Right.
It's from a place of honoring.
Yeah. And badassery.
Badassery. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This is hard. This life is, some days it's a living and some days it's a lifestyle. You have to wake up each morning. Well, you know the lyric.
Do I?
With a smile on your face. Who's saying it? And show
Carol
the
Kane.
world. Oh, of course. Yes. Hello. Thank you. I don't want a Lessing table. I don't want my world to get smaller. I don't want to live in fear. I'm about to turn 62. Now, you don't have to, you can edit that. But
60 blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. No. I'm about to turn 46.
50 blah, blah, blah. Okay,
Yeah,
40 blah, blah, blah.
My dad's license plate was BMH 46. And it was because he said that his 46th year was his best year and he wasn't going to get any older.
Okay.
And so maybe I'm turning 46, but so I'm turning 62 And it's my golden year.
Mm.
I mean, I tell myself this kind of thing all the time.
It's a golden year, whether or not it's a golden year, or is it actually a golden year?
It's going to be a golden year.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it be the best that I can make it. I was born in 62. I'm turning 62. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But
you're open to receive whatever it is, right?
yes. So a couple years ago, not this past August, but the August before, out in the West, in those beautiful places doing shows, I just had a great July, a great August, and a great September.
Okay.
And a great October. And before those, I had thought, wow, all this setting up and taking down and driving thousands of miles and working in the dark room all the time. And I'm 60. It's supposed to be getting easier.
Okay. Yeah.
Or something. But then, I realized that August, a friend of mine and her partner and I were camping.
Okay.
And we were at this beautiful place that was hard to get to.
Like to drive to or to walk to? You're saying like
Well,
to
it was
kite?
hard to drive to it.
Okay.
Like a graded road.
Sure.
But, and there was no electricity and no water and no bathrooms. And it was a trailhead in Idaho.
Okay.
With a campground. And we'd never been there before, but we swam around the edge of this tree-lined, beautiful lake,
Okay.
an alpine lake.
Mm-hmm.
And as we came around the bend of this little inlet, the view was insane. It was like nothing we'd ever seen before. The Sawtooth Mountains in all their glory with snow peaks and the sky and the expanse of water.
Yeah.
And I was like, God damn it, this is great. My friend and I looked at each other and said, wow, oh my God, this is incredible. And right around then, I began to realize, I don't want to slow down. I want to speed up. I've just begun to get good at what I do.
I've been feeling that way lately, Renee and I, with our work too. Like a lot of the hard work that we've done over the years, it's kind of coming all together, and a lot of good opportunities and a lot of things are firing our way. And it's like, it feels good, doesn't it? It just kind of feels good to have that moment where okay, am I at the point where I want to slow down? Or is it the time I want to keep going on that momentum and build on that momentum and see where that takes it? It sounds like that's what you're saying.
I think I'm just beginning. And for many people that are mothers, parents, I shouldn't just say mothers, parents, and caregivers of their parents and family members, it seems like you finish school and have a life, and so often that life includes taking care of other people as much as you, or more than you take care of yourself, including your professional goals. I spent, like you guys, how long did you spend with your kids? And, I have peers who had other responsibilities that are like having children. But my older brother, immensely talented musician that never had to take the time to, pack lunches and get the kid back and forth to school and band practice and, sports. And he was able to focus from the time he was very young. That's all he did. And he did it so well and still does that he's at a different point in his career, because he just was 0 to 60, and I'm not talking 60 years old, just like that. And would I trade all the wonderful time I've spent being a mother or being a daughter? and a granddaughter and a sister
Mm-hmm.
for all the wealth and fame that others have? Well, maybe. No, maybe. I don't know.
Perhaps.
What kind of shoes do they have?
How much money are we talking about?
Right. I know. Yeah. So I wouldn't trade all of that, but I think that there was a period of time, there was just this massive explosion of things that were going on in other people's lives, not mine. I mean, just ancillary because I was their person.
Yeah.
You know, my son in his mid-teens, my mother reaching the end of her life,
Yeah.
and my younger brother, not my older brother,
The musician.
the musician, but my younger brother had this terrible stroke. And so there was this time where I was having to do shows to work, to make money, to pay for my life.
Oh my God.
But I was also, phoning in healthcare
I've been
because
there.
I was responsible for, yeah. And it's like there were several years there where I felt as if I didn't have time to sustain a thought.
You didn't have time for images, I'm guessing, to kind of stick with you. Like now it feels maybe like a luxury to have an image come and to have it sit around your brain for a while because you're not thinking about all those other people you have to take care of.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe that is part of what is fueling this point in your career where you feel like you can speed up because that's what is needed in order to do that.
I think that building the resilience
Mm-hmm.
that comes from living life, the joys and the sadness, with each passing year, as the world becomes bigger than our grief,
Mm-hmm.
every person has these terrible, heartbreaking things happen.
Mm-hmm.
The resilience you build during that time is what can really make your work better. It makes my work better. That was just kind of a non sequitur thought.
Well, no, but it sparked something that's been on my mind lately with something. So you're talking about resilience. And I've also thought similarly about thinking about adaptation. I kind of think resilience and adaptation kind of go hand in hand in the sense that a lot of people know that I went through those 2 big surgeries where I had ankle fusions and I had to really become so physically deteriorated before I could have those surgeries. And now I'm on the other side of it and I've been doing a lot of rehabbing and thinking a lot about my body and being very into like how my body functions and moves and how it adapted to these deformities. And yet I was still able to walk. And now I'm trying to walk with a new reality, a new structure, a new formation. And I feel like that adaptation, the body's ability to adapt is pretty remarkable. And I also think that we adapt as artists based on our circumstances, based on working conditions, based on being out on the road and what's going to happen to us out there, because that's an unpredictable mass of crap all the time. I don't know. Does that resonate with you, the idea of adapting?
Yeah, I like the way that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Adaptation. What is it? That the novel or the film?
There was a film. Was it based on a
Yeah.
novel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Based on the Orchid Thief, I believe.
Okay.
Anyway, I've always loved that word, and that's brilliant. You are a prime example. I mean, it's like what I'm talking about. You're a metaphor for building resilience,
Mm-hmm.
and adaptation is maybe the word that I'm looking for to apply to how I'm moving forward. I mean, I don't want to be defined as the woman who had the crazy person go after her
Mm-hmm.
because of the hanger piece, or, confront me about whatever else.
I mean, it's something that happened to you, but that's not who you are.
Yeah.
That's not the work, necessarily the work you're trying to create or not create. It's a situation, but I feel like you standing in your own power of creating the work that you want to create. And yeah, you had that uncomfortable situation, which was scary, but you adapt. You're resilient. You fought through it.
Exactly.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
You know, Will, I sat down last week and started looking over what shows are listed in Zap that I want to apply to for the next season.
Oh, thanks for the panic attack. I appreciate that. I haven't even begun.
Oh.
No, I really appreciate what they're doing for us as an industry.
You know, it's not just about us artists. I mean, it's also about the shows. They get to jury their show using our application images, and then the shows can manage all of our information using Zap's online platform.
I don't know about you, but I find myself late night doom scrolling after that first rejection of the season, so it's always helpful to me to have everything in one place.
Yeah. I guess we've gotten to this point in the talk. I think we need to go back and kind of set up your work a little bit better because you're a photographer, but nowadays most photographers are working digitally, and you're working with film. Do I understand that right?
You are correct, sir.
Tell me about that ancient technique of taking photographs.
Yeah. So that's how I do it. And I knew when we were planning on talking, that the question of how I work would come up. And I'll explain it to you.
Okay.
And this is the way it's been forever and ever in my process.
Okay.
I have whatever visual for whatever reason. And I'm pressed to the point where it's a driving force in my mind that I have to photograph what is typically a single object for whatever reason.
Like a studio shot, right? Would that be how it's described or defined,
Well,
a studio shot?
You know, I actually don't shoot these things in the studio.
Okay.
Yeah, I take the camera, I take the object or objects, I set them up, and I do it outside almost exclusively because I like all the big light that a good 2:00 in the afternoon June day can give you.
Gotcha.
And if you look at my images, there are almost always shadows, directional light, and I bounce a lot of light to make the parts of the objects live, you know. I use black and white film. So let's use the green peas as an example. I don't know if you've seen that piece.
It's a new piece. I love it. Yeah, it's on here. I'm looking at your Instagram page right here. You know, the bowl it's in, it's like grandma's cut crystal bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking about this and I have a note. When I have the idea, I'll make a sketch. I'll make a note. And I saw that in its fullness, in its absolute, exactly the way it is in the image way. And the note that I made, I have it in front of me because I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
I wrote this down in my terrible handwriting, perhaps in the dark, you know, maybe in the middle of the night. I wrote this down. I didn't put a date on it, but I wrote big cut glass bowl of green peas with a pat of butter on top and some salty sprinkles. The glass bowl would have little feet on the bottom, hyper real green peas, bright green peas, yellow butter square pat.
So you visually saw it and you had to get all of those descriptive adjectives and words down so you could come back to that image. And then is it to actually make it real? If it doesn't fit what you've described, it's not going to happen, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, you know, like exclamation marks all over my brain. And
there has to be a shadow right here and it has to have a highlight over there.
Exactly. Yes. I've been doing this using my camera. The camera I use now, I have a lot of cameras, but the one I use exclusively for this body of work. And I have a backup because, you know, you never know. My parents gave me in 1983 and it's a 35 millimeter Canon T70 and I use a 50 millimeter lens. I'll often use a scaffold in the case of the green peas.
Okay.
I didn't. I have a special table that I've built, like a white seamless. I can bounce light onto whatever is sitting on the white seamless, a bowl of peas in this instance. from the back, from the front, from the left, from the right, from above, from below. But it's all natural light, because if I was using a flash or a strobe, I wouldn't be able to visualize the shadow because it's
Exactly.
60th of a second. So in this case, I had to find the bull. I knew I had the bull in my life somewhere. I just didn't know whether it was from my grandmother, my auntie, or the neighbor, or my mom,
You knew it
or
existed out there somewhere.
yes, or I wouldn't have thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the impassioned searching for a bowl, and then the right green peas. Oh my God. And then the butter, and then the salt.
Mm-hmm.
People see me tearing around town like, okay, I need this bowl.
Do you put them on little signs that you put on the trees in search of?
Yeah. No, I'll call my friends. I'll put a social media note out.
Cool.
I'll call my relatives and text people. And my closest friends just know there's no reason to ask why.
Yeah.
So I have an image of an umbrella, not open, a closed umbrella. When I had this idea, I let everyone know I was looking for an umbrella. And at the end of the day, I had, 28 umbrellas on my porch that people had dropped by saying, well, maybe this is it. And of course, the umbrella that I was visualizing was hanging on a tool tag board in my parents' garage and probably had been there for 30 years. And I'd walked past it much of my life.
But it was in that, the subconscious
Yeah,
rattling
exactly.
around in there.
Yeah. And, I have an image of a sleeping bag. And this was kind of recent.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked all my friends. I had such a strong image of it. I just didn't know where. And of course, the sleeping bag represented the typical family camping, sleepover, childhood, cocooning, the comfort, the smell of wood smoke, and the sound of a tent zipper. But also, if you look at the image, it's visualization of my version of the Ukrainian flag.
Okay.
Because it's blue and yellow. And I didn't really realize what in my subconscious was going on. My friends brought so many sleeping bags over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a bedroom full of sleeping bags and none of them were right. And of course, the sleeping bag that was right was in my basement.
Callie, I've known you for years, but you're painting a new picture of somebody I don't know that I know. I mean, I'm thinking of you as the artist, like the dramatic artist saying, no, it's not right. I have to find the right sleeping bag. Is that really what it is?
Well, in those moments,
yeah,
know, when in that moment, that pure visual time where I often have no idea why I'm impassioned to do this.
So it's got to be really fulfilling to go out on this hunt and then to get the shot and to have the final piece be what you want it to be.
It's so gratifying. Photography is a funny beast because there are so many levels.
Everybody has a camera in their hands and they think they're a photographer.
As I said at the beginning of our talk, I have very distinct opinions about things.
Mm-hmm.
And once I offer them up, I can't unsay them.
Okay.
So
here it comes.
I think it's great that, I think it's great that people want to create. Mm-hmm. Whether it's using a cell phone to take a selfie or out on a county park trail taking pictures of the sunset or grasses. Mm-hmm. I just love that people are moved to want to express themselves.
Yeah.
And so no judgment. But there was this time where I had this image in my mind of a roller shade, like the kind you pull down that has a little
spring-loaded
pull.
On it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a shade pull. And I had a visual of my great aunt's house and her shade pulls. And of course, she was long gone. I go into this drapery store and they, of course, think I'm a nut. I was probably wearing my pajamas, I'm having an emergency. I need a window shade pull like my great aunt had. And they were like, okay. She's like, but I've got to have it. And of course they had one. And it's a beautiful image. That's one of my favorite images I've ever made, the window shade.
And when you find that item, in the store or the whatever, and you have that reaction of, oh my God. So they look at you like, this woman is just off the charts.
She a case. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love it.
Well, you got to beast it on up and be yourself and do the thing that you want to do.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then
it's your own loss, right? If you're not
right?
expressing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So traditional photography is what I do. It's what I've always done. And the process of using the camera that my parents gave me in 1983, it's just a coincidence that is my way of expressing these inevitable visuals that are a product of my life. Everything is a story of almost exclusively something beautiful to me. Like, the life preserver image is a metaphor, of course, for everyone loves a good day at the lake, but it's also for those days when you need someone to throw you a life preserver, right? I have such strong sensory memories from my childhood of the way that copper tone smells. The smell of water. Water's my thing. But all of my images have something of that. Strangely enough, I don't even like green peas.
Well, what I'm picking up from you is the sensory of connections from relationships past, family experiences, whatever. So, I mean, I guess it wouldn't have to necessarily be that you like to ingest them. It could be the memory of someone in your life who presented them.
Well,
I mean,
I think
was that it?
That the things that when we're younger, we find the most scary or unfamiliar, like uncomfortable family reunion dinners where you are a teenager and you and your cousins just want to leave the table and let the adults talk, and you have to sit there and eat green peas and make nice conversation with people you might see once every 5 or 6 years.
It's interesting that green peas would bring up that
right?
specific
Well,
situation.
Now,
yeah,
I so wish that I could have those moments back. Wouldn't that be great
to do differently,
be able
or what?
To ask Uncle Ben or Aunt Newell about, what was that really like for you? What are your memories of your dad? Or just spend one more hour with my grandmother. So the representation of my love of those moments, and maybe a bittersweet sadness that I didn't recognize them for the wonderful opportunities they were at the time. It's like that Harry Chapin, the Tea for the Tillerman song.
Tea for the Tillerman? No, I don't know it.
It's a story song where the father is always too busy for the son, and then the son
the Cat's in the Cradle.
Busy for the yes.
Oh my God, yes. My dad always says fucking song when he hears it.
Yeah, isn't that life? And isn't it funny how we see that in our own lives now as parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
But actually, I've not to take away from what you were going to say, but we've had these great conversations with our 20-something-year-olds just the past, number of years. It's so cool seeing them become adults and hearing my daughter, talk about memories in the past and almost like feeling like, oh my God, I was thinking maybe she had a different opinion of that, but she sounds like good. She sounds happy. She's, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh my God, we can be okay. We can exhale. We don't have to feel bad about everything we did wrong as parents, that we did a few good things. So that's awesome.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
There's just no greater joy than watching that apple fall not far from the tree.
Yeah.
However, there are also times where I think, how did my parents deal with us?
You sound like a creative bunch.
We are. Yeah. My dad was in theater.
Okay.
And he and my mother met doing summer stock where she was the dance captain.
Okay.
Anyway, so theater, dance, and then Lawrence, my older brother, the jazz pianist,
Mm-hmm.
and me. It was a great life, a great way to grow up.
What was your role in the family?
Well, I was the middle. I was the only girl.
Okay.
And I met with great approval all the time.
Did you?
I had,
Okay.
oh yeah, yeah.
Because you like tried really hard, or because you were like the apple of their eye?
Well, I do have my charms.
Yeah, well, you do.
Yeah.
It is known.
I mean, so I think I was sweet. My real name is not Cali. My real name is Kathleen Stewart Hobgood.
Okay.
And my nickname when I was a girl was Kitty.
Oh.
I know, meow.
You're going to have hundreds of artists referring to you as Kitty just to give you a hard time from here on out.
That would be Miss Kitty, right?
Okay.
I felt very uncomfortable about it. We moved from a large city to the Midwest when I was 12, and I couldn't be Kitty in my mind. And I chose the name Cali.
Yeah.
And made my family call me Cali.
You had to keep correcting them when they would call you Kitty?
It took a while.
It took a while,
bit. Yeah. It's interesting because I could just as easily be Kathleen or Callie. A rose by any other name is just as sweet. or not. But
when you didn't want to be Kitty anymore, did Kathleen feel too formal?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of nicknames.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're Kathleen, you are Kathy. And I have so many cousins that are Kathy or Kate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was just talking to my son about this a couple days ago.
Yeah.
I have never been able to help just forging ahead and being whatever I feel like being at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those moments. And it's kind of funny because I have to be Kathleen with my passport, my driver's license, all of that stuff. And so
documented, formal. Yeah.
Yeah. Every now and then someone like at the doctor's office will be saying, Kathleen. And I'll just be sitting there like,
right. You're just,
where is that Kathleen bitch? Right?
What? I wonder why that Kathleen didn't show up, for Christ's sake. Oh, that's me.
I'll take her appointment. I'm getting tired of sitting around. But anyway, back to my process.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're leading this. So
no, go to the process. I'm good with that.
So when I take the photograph with the camera, I develop the film. I overexpose the film, black and white film that's pretty fast for me. But then again, I was learning about this in the 70s and the 80s. So I used a 400 film and set it at 200, my ISO, which is ostensibly overexposing by one stop already right there. So you get a more contrasty negative.
It's good when you use layman's terms because us glassblowers know nothing about what you're talking about.
So then when I'm metering off of my subject, I continue to overexpose by at least one or two stops. So I end up having a really dense negative, a lot of really dense negatives. Mm-hmm. So you hold it up and the gradient is pretty much black or white. There's not a lot of in between in my highly overexposed film. Mm-hmm. And then I print in a traditional black and white wet silver process darkroom. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I use an enlarger that allows me to expose over a great distance from the ceiling, and the paper can be on the ground.
Okay.
And so I can make really huge images from these tiny little negatives. A 35 millimeter negative isn't very large.
Yeah.
And that's not the way I always do it, but I love the big images the most.
Yeah.
The grain, that's what you call the tiny little.
Like in digital realms, it would be DPI kind of thing, or in
digital world, it would be pixels.
Pixels, right. Mm-hmm.
And of course, one of the main differences between traditional black and white film in darkroom photography and digital photography is that grain is round and pixels are square. I
right.
mean, this could have changed because I really don't know very much about digital at all, but I know that much.
Yeah.
So my eyes are round.
Yeah.
My lens is round. The world is round. And grain is round. So it all goes together for me.
Yeah.
So when I take my glasses off, I'm very nearsighted. Everything looks kind of grainy and contrasty, like my images. It's like I've found a way to reproduce how I see the world.
My God, that's so cool.
I so often wish, I mean, unfortunately, I suppose the only option for what I'd like to imagine could be, like, I wish I could capture things really the way I see them. You know, when I'm laying in bed and looking at my absolutely adorable dog sitting beside me, I wish I could take a picture of that and have that, not for my work, but
but to have that image be what your eyes see forever.
Yeah. Yes. So when I have the green peas set up on the white seamless that is being illuminated by the sun, I'm trying to make the image that I see on the inside of my mind and through my eyes look exactly like what I print in the darkroom. When what I see in my mind, my mind's eye, and in the real, that's when I know it's good. That is the beginning of being able to be an artist in my world, in what I do.
Yeah.
Then I print. I print on Ilford black and white, multi-grade, resin-coated paper. Now, for photographers, for film photographers that work in the darkroom, they would know what I mean. I use magenta filtration while I'm printing with my enlarger. I have a color head enlarger that has a magenta filter that I can increase, which increases the contrast of my black and white images even more. Use Ilford photochemistry as well. Have big 10-foot darkroom sinks and a tiny little 10-watt bulb in my safe light. So I have some illumination. Most people have been in a dark room, or I like to imagine.
I haven't been in a dark room, but you see, like in TV shows or movies or whatever, and it seems like this kind of magical place.
It is magical. I will tell you, it's always wrong.
Is it?
In TV and movies.
How they present it? Yeah.
You know, I can't read fiction about photography because that's all it is. But yeah,
it is
you know,
fiction.
no dark room is that bright, and no one is reaching into a tray of fix with their bare hands and then holding it up and looking at it.
Saying Eureka.
Yeah, it's like, no, I mean, that's pretty nasty. Put on some gloves, bitch, right? So, COVID was pretty easy for me because a lot of the same practice of safety and remaining separate from your environment with masks, gloves, face shield, face protection.
You were
and stuff.
set up for that, huh?
I already had all that. And, you know, I had that. I had made an image of a surgical mask before COVID.
Oh, my gosh.
Right before COVID.
Okay, Cali, we need to talk now. You see images in your mind. You're doing all this stuff before it actually happens. Are you precognitive, psychic? What's going on here?
It is kind of funny. I mean, I do freak myself out sometimes, but that was a weird coincidence.
Yeah.
I'm an observer. I'm a visual person, as all of us are, but I'm a real observer. I look at things and I look for the synchronicity.
Do you think the stage background or the theater background in your life, that plays into how you present your work?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I kind of pick up on that a little bit.
Yeah. Watching my father be a director for his career meant that I spent a lot of time sitting in the theater after school or just because I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And watching blocking and rehearsal was great fodder for me.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, most of that stuff went on not in an actual black box,
Mm-hmm.
most of rehearsals and everything that go into a production like that happen where you're imagining the proscenium.
Mm-hmm.
You're imagining where the edge of the stage is. You're imagining there's an audience
Mm-hmm.
or there's light or sound effects and costumes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, the way your mind imagines a scenario when you're reading a novel.
Mm-hmm.
And I read all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that kind of, yes, this is a stage. Stage left, we have this.
Mm-hmm. It feels that way. Definitely
And
like there's a composition of that. One thing we learned in theater aesthetics was how to direct the eye and focal point and all that. And I feel like I pick up on that with how your
yeah,
work is presented.
most definitely. I think the set designers and the kind of productions that I witnessed come to life, like my preference for strong visuals, stark, not astringent, but clean, 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 clean.
Mm-hmm.
Just I distill an image to the point where there's not much there, not a lot of ancillary information,
Mm-hmm.
always surrounded by white to isolate from the very beginning. And I started doing photography when I was really young, 14,
Mm-hmm.
back when public schools had a lot of great programs for art and music
Mm-hmm.
and a different kind of world. And typically the girls took home ec and the guys took shop.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we had this home ec teacher that just drove me absolutely nuts. She
Okay.
was this little lady that had really tightly wound, she was so type A, she was triple A. And I already knew how to sew and how to cook things. And I was just over this.
Okay.
And I went to, I guess, my principal and said, "Oh, I'm over this."
Just give me my A. Can I take shop maybe?
I probably was sent to the principal instead of going voluntarily. But he said, "I've got an idea." And I went to the industrial arts class.
Okay.
And I was like the only girl, and we did electricity and some wood shop, and then hit like industrial drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I was not into that. I did not dig that,
Okay.
using tools.
Protractors or something. I
Right.
don't know if I'm using the
Yes.
right words.
I
All
was
sorts
like,
of stuff.
oh, I'm becoming a problem child in shop class, just like I was in home ec. And the teacher, Tony Ash, great man.
Okay.
He said, "Cali," he was Bahamian.
Okay.
He said, "Cali, I have got just the thing." And he gave me 2 Canon cameras, all the film, big roll film. You rolled your own film.
Yeah.
And run of the darkroom. He gave me like a crash course on how to do
Mm-hmm.
things
Yeah.
and just said, "Now get out of here. Stop bothering all of us. We know you don't like industrial drawing."
So that's how
Anyway,
it all started then,
that
huh?
was the beginning. And my dad had always taken a lot of photographs, partly because of the theater
Mm-hmm.
and partly because he was a dad.
Mm-hmm.
And we traveled all around the world and, slideshows. That was our vibe.
Oh, cool.
So it was just good, that feeling, the smell of film, the feeling of advancing the film and the vibration when you depress the shutter. And
You are so sensory, aren't you?
I am. And the sound of the trickling water in the darkroom
Mm-hmm.
and my timer. A lot of my exposures are really long. And just the hush. It's like, I know this is soppy, but
No, let's hear it.
the first time I went to the redwoods as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I walked in through this big path to Muir Woods,
Mm-hmm.
and the hush of those huge trees and redwoods, sequoias, whatever they are, the great distance between the pine needles, the the fir tree needles on the ground, and the canopy of the trees,
Yeah.
that hush, that environment that's so unique. That reminds me of my darkroom.
Wow.
It's a completely private place. My family and friends
Yeah.
know better than to even think about opening that door or interrupting me.
Right. The work is ruined then, right?
Exactly. And, with mural paper, I get huge rolls of 43.5 inch wide, 100-foot long paper
Mm-hmm.
that costs a lot of money. I have to cut that paper and process it after exposing it with the enlarger in open bath trays. And so that can be, an hour and a half of absolute dark. And if someone opens the door, well,
Will they hear you curse?
yeah. I did. So I had this cleaning lady
Okay.
one time who opened the door.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because her name was Rosario.
Oh.
And apparently there's a
Sound
television
like Megan
show.
Mullally on Will and Grace.
Yes. Anyway.
So I wanted to ask you, I was surprised. I did not realize that you shoot on black and white film until just recently, and that you're hand painting each of your images. So that's where the color comes in.
Yes, it's true. When I was in college, I had a professor, Barbara Genevieve. She was a very pivotal figure in the post-feminist world of photography. And she was a brutalist. I would never want to be in her mind. I learned what I did not want to be as a person, as an artist, as a photographer from her. But man, she was like a train wreck.
Oh.
I was fascinated
what
by
not
her.
to do?
Yeah, yes, and how not to be. But she made these huge images using the same mural printing technique that I use, and she hand colored them.
Okay.
Because at the time, in the early 80s, color processors were not a thing. And printing really large color work didn't matter if it was C41, there are a lot of different photo processes. Color photography requires the chemistry be, or it did then, the developer had to be 102 degrees. And so if you imagine, what is a liquid like at 102 degrees? Well, at first it's incredibly toxic. It's a hard process to do and really unhealthy. So Barbara, pragmatist, was like, okay, I'm going to use oils on top of my huge black and white images to replace the really hard task of printing huge color images.
So all the way back then, and that's stayed with you. That's been your technique through all these years.
Well, when I was growing up, my grandmother, who lived with us half of the year after she retired, and with my uncle the other half of the year, had a lot of family portraits and pictures that were hand colored. Yeah. And not of images like mine, of people, of...
Oh, I've got lots of family members too. Same deal. They were colorized. I can't remember. Like my parents, for example, their high school graduation photos. We've got the 8x10s of those, and they were hand colored.
I mean, it was a normalized way of doing things to me from the time I was a little, tall enough to see the images on the walls. That was where it began.
Do you think that technique adds a little bit of nostalgia to the work too? That way you add color to your work? I mean, aside from the whole setup?
Yeah, for me, it was just, I did a lot of large format color work. Like, not large, 4x5 color work. A lot of very theatrical. I mean, I'll show you.
Yeah, please.
Sometime.
Yeah, please.
And I hesitate, because a lot of it was self-portraiture. I hesitate to put anything out on social media because that's got a life of its own.
Totally.
But I was always very dramatic. My dad would have preferred, I think, for me to go into theater. I always had that Hobgood shit-eating grin. However,
I think I have one of those shit-eating grins.
yeah, it's impossible to escape it. I mean, like, there's some imp in me and I can't make it go away.
Okay.
So I would, much like my process now, I would get this idea like, oh, I'm going to build out the photo studio at the university, at the art and design building. I'm going to build a cave. And then I'm going to be, some mythological figure. Or, I did a whole series of the elements.
Okay.
Be wind, be water. It's just, those were good times. I mean, it was the 80s. So you could do whatever the hell you wanted. Anyway, those were really hard to print.
Okay.
If I wanted to make them as big as, like, if I wanted my head to be as big as my head, I learned the same thing that Barbara DeGenevieve had learned, and that is it's really hard to do that. And I didn't have enough money to have someone else do it in a professional lab. And so I started using oils.
Isn't that how we just figure stuff out when we don't have the money to do what other people send out to have done?
Yeah. So Roseanne Cash did this Library of Congress. I'm getting the name right. Will would fact check me on this.
Okay.
Roseanne Cash did this Library of Congress set of talking, interviews.
Like what we're doing now.
That. Where she was talking about the history of country music, right? Okay. Or the history of music, not just country music.
Okay.
I was listening to Terry Gross talking to her or someone about this, maybe not her. And the phrase, style is the result of our limitations, has always stuck with me because that is so much the case with my work and so many people's work.
Cool.
Rembrandt charged extra for hands because they're hard, right? You want your feet in there,
and AI will just throw in another finger, so they can't get hands right either.
Yeah. You don't have to be Maxfield Parrish to figure that out. That's always my response to AI. People that are using AI and regenerative photo processes.
Yeah.
I look back at Maxfield Parrish or Thomas Hart Benton, and I'm sorry that my art history education happened at a time where I wasn't really turned on to a lot of really intense women artists at the time.
Okay.
But that's a story for another day. Don't get me started on that.
Okay. Because you'd make me edit it all out and people would hear it and they can't unhear it. No, anyway.
Right. Yeah. So if you look at Maxfield Parrish and that kind of insanely intense, vibrant, crazy, not as crazy as like Hieronymus Bosch stuff. I just want to tell people, build some skills, practice 10,000 hours, do it yourself. Plus, Maxfield Parrish was hot, super hot, smoking hot. And I think Thomas Hart Benton was too. And that's my thing on AI right now.
Okay.
But back to the hand coloring.
Okay. Yeah.
I use oils. I use a lot of Q-tips and cotton balls.
Is that for texturing?
Because my paper, Ilford black and white variable contrast resin coated pearl surface paper, doesn't have tooth. If I used a brush, kind of brushes on and then you brush it off right away. And so when I take oil, like imagine a Q-tip, but it's not exactly a Q-tip, but it's a reference that people understand.
Yeah.
And I'll take a lot of oil. Since we're talking about the green peas, let's stick with that. I'll put it on the photograph to the point that it's opaque and you can't see the photograph underneath it. But then I'll work that oil to create a gradient of opacity through patting it with cotton balls or picking up bits of it with tiny little bits of cotton until I get it the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you look at your forearm,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't just have one color. It's a million. Who is it that said a million points of light? Was that Barack Obama? Bill Clinton? Somebody like that.
Yeah, right.
A
Somebody
million
important.
points of light. Yeah, right.
I'm thinking of you too, but that's the city of blinding lights.
I think it's all coming from the same place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So if you look at any object, except for a flat piece of white paper,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much tonality, so many different
Mm-hmm.
variables and reflective things. And of course, photography is all about light.
Mm-hmm.
To make a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object, which is basically what I do,
Yeah.
to make it alive, to give it that three-dimensionality
Mm-hmm.
that I believe I achieve in a lot of my images,
Mm-hmm.
is a series of compromises of highlight and color. I can look at one green pea or one section of the life preserver or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and see it as its own entity, but I have to step back like the Impressionists and Pointillism,
Yeah.
to step back to see the whole thing, to see how it all works together to form the concept,
Right.
the expression of a bowl of green peas,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the literal green peas. So all of my work is really clean. I clean up the edges of the oil paint.
Yeah.
I use a dry mount press. My husband is a museum guy, so I have a lot of
Oh, okay.
rules for how to handle and how to present
Mm-hmm.
artwork that come from the museum world.
I see.
The principles of that, but like I think you need to do things a certain way, the museum standard way.
Even if we're out on the street?
Yes, yeah. But principles are like prayers,
Mm-hmm.
noble but awkward at a party. So I'm not a hard ass.
So I wanted to ask you about that. So you said something a little back where you were saying capturing a two-dimensional image of a three-dimensional thing. And that's something I struggle with all the time with trying to capture our work digitally, whatever, just for stupid stuff like Instagram, marketing for websites, jurying into shows.
Oh yeah.
It's like the bane of my existence. It'll be like, it doesn't look like what I'm seeing. The magic is gone because it's gone flat.
Mm-hmm.
Is it all about the light? Like you were saying earlier, is it about the light that makes it three-dimensional?
I think it's about the way I see the light.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at an oil painting that includes a lot of highlighting to make something come alive,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same technique. I don't use white paint to
Mhm.
create that
Mm.
negative space that causes something to pop. It's a feeling.
Mm.
It's the heartbeat of the knowing. That's a really vague way of putting it, but
No, but I like it. I like that esoteric kind of statement. It's the heartbeat of the knowing.
there are hard things to describe. Pornography, you know it when you see it.
Mhm.
Like what right?
Not your work.
No, not yet. Or you don't know that.
She's just getting started, people.
There are all kinds of you remember when I was in school, the studying subliminal seduction was part of what they expected you to be able to at least talk about in the workforce if you left school to work as a photographer in the print world.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Remember the Smirnoff
Mhm.
vodka ad where the urban myth was that there were naked people in the ice cubes?
I don't remember that.
Yes, subliminal seduction. Yeah.
I remember the Farrah Fawcett hair thing where they were. Do you remember that? What I'm talking about?
Well, I remember the poster.
The poster,
that you're
but
talking
there
about.
was supposedly something. I mean, this is getting weird, but in the waves of her hair, there was supposed to be subliminal imagery that came through.
Well,
it.
after we get off the phone, or after we get off of this.
Whatever
I'm going
this
to
is.
go check my Farrah Fawcett poster to
Okay.
see what's in her hair.
Okay.
I mean, she's right by Mark Spitz in his little Speedo.
Okay.
Right? No, I'm kidding. Maybe. Ritz crackers supposedly in their ad images
Okay.
had sex spelled
Well, that's what I
in.
thought it was with her hair. So honest, I wasn't sure of that, but when you just
Might
said that
be
about Ritz, I'm
conflating
like,
it,
that's
yeah.
what I remembered.
Yeah.
So cool.
So
Interesting.
I think with what you just asked, two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object,
Yeah.
color gets all the credit.
Mm.
Value does all the work. And by value, I mean the gradient scale of black to white, the contrast. I have a book that's my edition number book and my darkroom notes book. So I work in editions from 5 images to 200 images. It just depends. So people wonder, we're talking about the hanger. How can I always have a hanger? Well, I haven't printed the entire edition of the hanger. And in photography, in the traditional school, the principles of photography, if you make an image in an edition and you decide I'm going to make 50 of these and you sign them and you number them 1 of 50, 2 of 50, 3 of 50, etc. When you finish the 50, you make the 51st. And the 51st is the same. I mean, I'm describing this in an ad hoc way.
Okay.
It's the same as the first 50, but the school of thought, the school in which I was raised, meant that you would take a sharp instrument and X through the emulsion side of your negative and print it as the proof that you have finished the edition. I take all of that really seriously.
Okay.
Everybody should work the way that they work. I work in the constructs of how I was taught.
So you could say it's another way of working isn't for you, but it's not saying it isn't for another artist.
Most people don't know when they're buying art at an art show, at a gallery. They want what they love. My biggest job as an artist is to give people permission to buy what they love. You know, it is okay. You are right. This is really cool. You should get this. And so part of my gestalt is just that I am very self-limiting. I add the presentation element that I've learned from being married since 1989 to a museum man. And that's like a working behind the scenes museum job, like preparator and exhibits designer, not a curator. We're definitely, it's amazing how much I've learned from him because that physical skill of being able to build things, cut mats, dry mount, or just make the tools you need to make tools. Like in the darkroom, you're always having, I jerry rig things all the time. And I never used to know how to do things like that. The way I was raised, other people did those things. And I mean, the closest thing in my house we had to a screwdriver was a corkscrew for sure. And
good for every use, right?
Right.
Any use.
So now I know how to do things. And I take joy in the execution of doing them. I mean, I take so much joy in doing a good slide for Zap. I take joy in a good packing job in my van.
I noticed that about you. Like, even when people are getting so stressed out at setting up a show, leaving a show, you seem unflappable. You seem like it'll get done when it gets done. You know, it does not seem like a race.
So far, it always has. I mean, there are times where we all think, golly, it's getting dark. I'm tired. What if I just left all of this here?
Walk
See
away.
ya.
Just walk away.
Yeah. Well, over all these years, even remember before GPS, where you'd have the printed out directions.
MapQuest.
I never didn't get to a show. I always managed to find my hotel.
Mm-hmm.
I always have managed to get home. There has yet to be a time when I have been completely unprepared. Now, this is all knock wood stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And have not managed to put the jigsaw puzzle back together
Mm-hmm.
at the end of a long show in my van.
Right.
There are some trials,
Yeah, for sure.
certainly. Those late nights where you're like, oh, but I'll plug in my headphones. Let's not overstate this because watch, I remember at Coconut Grove,
Mm-hmm.
packing up at Coconut Grove this past year.
Mm.
I was, dang, 61 is hard. I'm taking a lot longer. I've actually made a lot of effort to make sure that I only get stronger instead of the opposite,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because and you've been talking about that as well.
Even though the years tick on, we do age and it is hard. We can find ways to do it a little kinder to ourselves, make choices.
Most of my closest friends travel as a unit,
Mm-hmm.
2 people, and I'm inherently solo.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely have anyone with me because I like to take all of my art
Mm-hmm.
and all of my comfort
Mm-hmm.
stuff and all the clothes that I might want to have. And I find that if I take someone with me, there is inevitably going to be an outfit or a pair of shoes or a bottle of wine that I can't fit in the van. So
Then a negotiation has to happen.
that is that they don't go and my wine does, right?
They
Yeah.
stay, wine goes.
Yeah. So interacting during setup and breakdown and during the show is so much easier for me when I'm by myself
Mm-hmm.
because no one else makes the work. With you two, you're a unit.
But we're 2 very different mentalities. And Renee does such a good job of reminding me that I don't need to make every stress into a crisis. She's a lot like you, where our quality of life is setting up the art show just as much as it is making the artwork. Packing the art van is the same thing as finishing and doing stuff in our clothes studio. It's all integrated. And do we want to spend any of our life miserable? And I don't necessarily intend that to happen, but I need reminders from time to time.
I'm with you. I do as well. I'll get home. I remember in 2019
Mm-hmm.
getting home from Plaza, and I had a really busy year, and I still do have a lot of family responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
My younger brother, I have him in a care facility close to where I live.
Okay.
And he's paralyzed on his left side,
Oh, no.
but he's a miracle.
Really?
I mean, nobody thought that he would live this long and that he would have this quality of life. And so, shout out to him.
Yeah.
He
so
works
life really
hard all
is
the
what you
time.
make it,
Yes. And he called and he's like, Cali,
Kitty?
yeah, Cali, I broke another cell phone charger. Do you have one? And it's not a big thing. You just have to go to the store and get whatever, or you have to make time to make someone else feel comfortable and have dignity. And am I going to worry over the fact that I spent an hour less in the darkroom today because I took the time to go find hopefully a new iPhone charger that Brent cannot break and take it to him and show him how to use it?
What I take from that is coming back to your peas. Your story about the peas at the table and wishing maybe you could go back in time and have sat down and talked to that one uncle that you mentioned instead of rushing out of the table. It sounds to me like you've got it in perspective now that these moments with the people you care about and you love, you don't want to take those for granted. So it's kind of like how you see the world. You talk about your artwork as how you see the world. And it really feels to me, at the end of this talk here, that your art life and your family life and your living life are so integrated.
Yeah, my work defines me and my life defines my work, certainly.
Chicken and egg.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the case for all of us. We're all working out creatively the same question, the same set of mysterious math equation. That's why we're doing this. Time and time again, I see us working even in all these different mediums so differently. We all have a similar goal. I love our lives.
Me too.
We're lucky people.
And I love this conversation. It's really given me a renewed inspiration. And I've known you so well, and now I know you even better. And I hope the listeners enjoyed this talk too, because I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Cali.
Thank you, Douglas. I want you to have a great rest of the year, and I will see you in 2025.
That's right. We will do that. Every art show artist, when they say goodbye, they say, "Where will I see you next?" But I won't keep this podcast episode going any longer with us discussing our schedules.
Right. Yeah.
I'll see you in 2025.
Sounds good.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I'm telling you, that was a very meaningful talk to me, and I hope you guys resonated with some of the information as well. Thanks again for listening. This podcast is so much fun for us. And whether you are off the road for a while and you get to just settle into the holidays and enjoy regular life again, or if it's a creative period where you're just turning out the work in anticipation for next year, or if you're actually still showing up at the shows all through this winter season and just keeping the ball rolling. Wherever you're at, we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.